So we are in the book of 2 Kings, and this morning we're going to finish out this big section we've been looking at since the beginning of chapter 4 with the prophet's care. So we're talking about Elisha in these things, and ever since 2 Kings chapter 4 and verse 1, we've been looking at how it is that Elisha has interacted with the people. So we've not been looking so much at the nation at large, but we've been getting glimpses into just zooming in at different families in the nation and at different situations that have arisen, and we see Elisha's care. But in seeing Elisha's care, whose care is it that we're really seeing for the people? It's God's care. Because Elisha cannot do the things that he was doing if not for God working through him. So when we say the prophet's care, really what we're looking at here is God's care. And so when we look at the close of this section, it's the first part of 2 Kings chapter 6. And this to me is a good example of how sometimes we compartmentalize things whenever it is we read or we study. And we just kind of go chapter by chapter, and we don't always put the bigger picture and the bigger sections together. Because this is the close of this bigger section, and there's a very clear shift that's going to happen in verse 8 with what's going on in the bigger narrative and the bigger history that's being told. But right here in 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 1 through 7, we're going to see Elisha's care as it's Elisha and the axe head. Somebody, if you would, to get us started in this, go ahead and read verses 1 to 3.
And the sons of the prophets said to Elisha, "See now the place where we dwell with you is too small for us. Please let us go to the Jordan, and let every man take a beam from there, and let us make there a place where we may dwell." So he answered, "Go." Then one said, "Please consent to go with your servants." And he answered, "I will go."
So in these verses we find the problem here. What's the problem that starts this particular section? They needed more room, right? They'd run out of space where they were. I don't have a map on this one, but most likely we're still looking at Gilgal. And if you remember the maps that I've been showing along the way, there were two possible locations. There's one that's closer to the Jordan, one that's a little further up in the mountains. Could be either one of those. But what we have is that the prophets, the sons of the prophets, those who were training, the way that we can think about these sons of the prophets is it's almost like a preacher school that we have today. So they're going, they're learning, they're being educated, they're learning from Elisha himself. And they come to Elisha and they say, "We need more room." Right? Where they were living, where they were studying, it just wasn't enough. So what are they going to do? Yeah, let's go down towards the Jordan, let's go down towards the river, and let's start cutting down some trees, so that way we have the timber that we need, that we can build a bigger space, that we can add on, that we can build new, make it bigger, make sure that there is plenty of room. And so Elisha, of course, tells them, well, that's fine, y'all can go ahead and you can go. But then verse 3, what takes place? Right, one of the sons of the prophets turns to Elisha and says, "Will you come with us?" Did Elisha have to go with them? No. Elisha didn't have to go with them. Elisha didn't have to be there to help them build this bigger building for them to be able to stay and live in. But he did anyway, didn't he? That's a sign right there of a good leader. Good leaders are going to be willing to do the things that they don't absolutely or necessarily have to do. They'll be willing to go above and beyond, and at times do these things that are difficult, that's going to make him sweat and going to make him work hard. And so that's just a sign and a picture there we see of Elisha and the heart for leadership that he really had. But then we keep looking and we come into verses 4 and 5. And this is where we have this axe head, the big thing that's going on right here. Somebody read 2 Kings chapter 6, verses 4 and 5.
So he went with them, and when they came to the Jordan, they cut down trees. But as one was cutting down a tree, the iron axe head fell into the water, and he cried out and said, "Alas, master, for it was borrowed."
Somebody tell me what's happening here. one of the sons of the prophets is cutting down a tree, and I don't know if maybe it was just a bad axe that he had borrowed, recognized that it was borrowed. I don't know if it was a bad axe already, or he just didn't know what he was doing, or what. But he goes to swing it, and what happens to the axe head? It ends up not just on the ground, but where? Down in the water. Now, what is the axe head going to do when it hits the water? It's going to go straight to the bottom, is it not? I mean, it's not like a little plastic axe that a kid might play with, that if it ends up in the water, it's just going to float there on the surface. It's not what we're dealing with. But we're dealing with an iron axe head that's going to go straight down to the bottom. And this is in the Jordan. So it's not like you have a very crystal clear water that you can clearly see, okay, well, it went in here, and then I just watched it as it slowly went down, and it may have drifted just slightly, but I can still see it sitting there at the bottom of the river. It's not that way. You remember what Naaman's frustration was when he was told to go dip in the Jordan 7 times? What was he angry about? It's dirty water, right? It's not like the clean, crystal clear waters of the rivers back home in Damascus, but the Jordan was a nasty, dirty river. So there's no way that they know exactly where this axe head landed. They can't go in and jump in and swim down to the bottom and find it, because what are they going to do? They're going to end up cutting themselves up with the axe head. So really, this axe head is lost. But thankfully, the son of the prophet did the right thing, and he didn't act like it was just nothing, and he couldn't go back and say, well, I don't know what happened to the axe head. No, but he goes to Elisha, and he makes sure Elisha knows what has happened, and looks to him for some help in the situation, because, of course, it was borrowed. Now, being borrowed and losing the axe head, what would that mean now for this particular student? If he'd lost the axe head that he borrowed, what's he going to have to do now? He's going to have to find a way to replace it. But he didn't have the money to replace it. Because if he had the money, he would have had his own axe. So we know that by the fact he's having to borrow it. You ever borrowed something from somebody, and as you're using it, it breaks on you? That's not a comfortable feeling, is it? Because you're sitting there and now you're thinking, well, how am I going to explain this to them? I know how to use this particular tool, but they're going to think I have no idea what I'm doing. They're never going to let me borrow anything ever again if I need it. And now what am I going to do? Because I can't really afford to pay to buy a new one for them right now. I just don't have that money. But that's what you've got to do to make things right whenever you break something or lose something that has been borrowed. So this particular student is in a very difficult situation. And another thing, too, that I had come across in one of the kind of background things I was looking at on this is it was talking about basically how chances are, because he didn't have the funds at this time, he'd probably have to, at least for some period of time, go into some form of debt, like a debtor's type slavery in this, to be able to work to pay it off. And all that while that he's working to pay off that debt that he owes for the axe head, what is he not able to do? He's not able to study and learn from Elisha. So all that valuable time would be lost. That's your hand, Alex.
Also, too, thinking about where he is right now, he's in school for the prophets. So if he wasn't able to return back, then that could potentially cast a bad reputation on the whole school of prophets, especially in light of Israel's spiritual outlook at the time. They probably didn't have a whole lot of respect for them to begin with as a whole. And then he loses that, and so, oh, you can't trust the sons of the prophets. They'll just break all your stuff, steal what you've got. You know, it could damage the reputation of the men that are trying to serve God.
That's a really good thought. I hadn't thought about that. If you didn't hear Alex thinking about how also, because he's part of these sons of the prophets and he's one of these students in this school, that if he's not able to return the axe head that he borrowed, what kind of reputation do you think that's going to give the rest of the people who are prophets, who are in that school learning and growing and studying? Right? It's not going to be a good look on them. Especially if you think about, as Alex mentioned, just the state, spiritually speaking, of Israel at this time. overall as a nation, they didn't really like the prophets. They didn't really trust in God, and now this is a good reason and fuel for the fire for them to be able to say, you can't trust them. Yeah, they preach all these things and they're high and mighty, but then you look what they do whenever they borrow your axe head, right? They don't care about it. They treat it like dirt and they don't give it back to you. And so you can see how this is a real problem that's going on. But thankfully, once we get to verses 6 and 7, we find that Elisha, and of course we know that if it's Elisha's doing it, it is God doing it, of retrieving the axe head. Someone read verses 6 and 7 now.
So the man of God said, where did it fall? And he showed him the place. So he cut off a stick and threw it in there. And he made the iron float. Therefore he said, pick it up for yourself. So he reached out his hand and took it.
It's always an interesting way that this little narrative right here ends, because it just kind of, I mean, everything is solved, but there's so many more questions, at least, that I'm left with in this. What does Elisha do in order to get the axe head back?
Ask where it's at.
He asks where it's at. He gets a stick, right? And he throws the stick in the water, and what happens?
Floats back up.
The iron axe head floats back up. Jesse said this is a miracle. There's no way around it. Anybody ever thrown a stick in the water? I've done it plenty of times, especially if you're ever out fishing. And if you're like me, you end up losing quite a few of your lures out there. But anytime I've ever been doing that and I've lost the lure, and especially if it has a weight on it so it sinks down to the bottom, when I throw a stick in the water, do you know what happens to that lure that's got a weight on it? It stays at the bottom, right? Now that's nothing compared to the weight of an iron axe head. And here's Elisha throwing a stick in the water, the iron axe head floating back up, and Elisha just kind of matter-of-factly says, go get it, right? Pick it up for yourself. And the son of the prophet reaches out, he grabs the iron axe head, he takes it, and that's where it ends right here. Like I say, I've got so many more questions because I'm sure the son of the prophet probably didn't stop talking about it for the rest of the day. And I would imagine that the son of the prophet, when he returns it, would say, you'll never believe what happened. It's an amazing thing that takes place here in this miracle. But this is why I've looped it back with everything that happens going back to the beginning of chapter 4. Did Elisha have to do this for that particular student? No. Elisha didn't even have to go there to be with him, but he did. And because he went, well, now he's able to help save that particular son of the prophet, that particular student in that school. And so he helps them retrieve the iron axe head. Just something for us to think about with this. What are some of the lessons that we can learn from this miracle? Yeah. Mm-hmm.
There were plenty of just normal ways he could have fixed the problem, but he went to God and God.
Mm-hmm.
I think sometimes the temptation is problems.
Yeah, that's a really good lesson. If you didn't hear Alex, to recognize from this that God cares about our mundane problems. This was not anything that affected the nation of Israel as a whole. This was not anything dealing with idolatrous worship, false worship, things like that. This was simply a man who's gone out, he's borrowed an axe, and he lost it in the water. And like Alex said, sometimes we have problems in our life that we think are not that big, right? It doesn't have to affect everybody else. Maybe it's only impacting us. Maybe it's just our family that's impacted by it, but we think, well, we don't need to bother God with that. Right? God is the creator of the world. God has all these other things that are going on that are more important than this little problem that I have going. But what do we learn from this particular son of the prophet? God cares. He goes to Elisha, and Elisha is able to perform this miracle by the power of God to bring the axe head back. No matter the problem we're going through, don't get in our head, well, this is a smaller problem than this problem over here, so I just need to kind of work on this one myself. It's not how it should be. But take the problems that we have to our God. Vel, did I hear you start to say one of the lessons a second ago?
I just didn't trust in the Lord.
Yeah, trust in the Lord, right? That's a big one that we have right here. I can only imagine for that student who loses the axe head, what am I going to do? Right? What am I about to do? I've just lost this axe head, and there's no way I can afford it, and now I'm not going to be able to study, and what am I going to do? And he learns, just trust in God. Right? That's a big lesson here. I'll go Jesse, and then I'll come to you, Paul. Mm-hmm. Yeah, still worried about and still concerned about me, right? Jesse connecting kind of the thought that Alex pulled to Psalm chapter 8. Psalm chapter 8, where we have it saying, "What is man that you are mindful of him?" Knowing how big God is, how powerful God is, yet through it all, God still concerns himself with me. He still concerns himself with you, right? Each one of us as individuals, God cares about. And that's something that ought to really cause us to stop and kind of be a sobering moment for us to realize, how much do I really care about God? Right? How much do I really trust in God? Am I willing to take not just the big things, but even the little things to him, because I know he cares and I know that he's going to help me through it. And so that's a good cross-reference to bring in there. Paul?
Think about you're regimented in your prayer life, then when something comes up that maybe if you're not, and then you foresee something, no, this is a major problem. I need to pray about this. I need to do this. You're regimented in your prayer life and trust in God. Nothing's ever a problem.
Mm-hmm.
There's nothing to be stressed about because you already have faith. You're already talking to God. You say, whatever comes in front of me, it'll get sorted out regardless.
Yeah.
And not that you wouldn't continue to, pray for that particular instance, but not as a last resort, I need to pray because I'm at my wit's end and I don't know what to do, and I'm stressed out, and this is a real problem, because to God it's not.
Mm-hmm.
And if we're regimented in our prayer life, then as those things come up, it's a non-issue.
Yeah.
I mean, there's going to be difficulties, no doubt, but the way we perceive those difficulties in trusting in God is far less stressful and far less a true problem.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. I think about Philippians 4, 6, and 7 with that. To be anxious for nothing, but in everything by prayer and supplication with requests. Let your requests be made known to God. And, of course, the peace of God that surpasses all understanding will guard your hearts and minds. Like you're saying, if we are dedicated in that, and use your terminology there, if we're regimented in that prayer life, then when we have those things that come up, we don't have to continue to worry about them, right? Philippians 4, 6, and 7, a very easy way to think about what Paul's saying in those verses is essentially to worry about nothing but pray about everything. Now that's, again, very simple way to put it, because as humans, we're going to have worries, right? But what do we do with those worries? Do we hold on to them? Do we let them eat at us and just wear us out from the wear away at us from the inside to the out? Or instead, do I recognize, okay, this is really bothering me. I'm worried about this, but I know I need to trust in God. Am I going to take it to God? And as the worry continues to come, what do I do with it? Do I decide, well, it's not that big of a deal. God's not going to do anything about this because he's got bigger things going on. Or instead, do I keep taking the worry back to God? So that's a good thought to bring out in that, Paul. Alex?
Another lesson that you can see, comparing this to the miracle of the whenever they were poisoned on.
Mm-hmm.
At that point, they didn't come to God until the problem was so big that everyone was affected by it. But even before they had a problem, they made sure that God was in their presence.
Yeah.
When they went to start building, they asked him to come with them.
Yeah.
So you see, it seems like a different mindset to me, like, hey, let's make sure God's with us before we even start out on this. Whereas everyone else was like, everyone's going to die, and we all need God.
That's a good thought. Alex, drawing some thoughts as well from the end of 2 Kings chapter 4, where we see the death in the pot incident. And as Alex was pointing out from that, it's almost as if they wait until the problem is so big and has affected everyone now that they've eaten of that stew, that they realize then now there's death in the pot. Now they go to Elisha. Now they go to God. Whereas in this particular situation, before the problem ever comes up with the axe head, who have they already gone to make sure he's there? They've gone to Elisha. They've essentially gone to God, making sure he's there with them before a problem ever arises. And so that's a good parallel we can draw from it. One other thing I had thought about in this particular miracle and a lesson we can learn, and this may be kind of oversimplifying it, I don't know, but one of the things I had thought about is the fact that God will rescue or restore that which has been lost. Now we see it in a very physical sense right here in this miracle, to see that this axe head has been lost, that they're not going to be able to get on their own. And who's the only one able to restore it? It's God, right? Through the miracle, he retrieves it, he restores it. But then think about it from the spiritual perspective, right? When we are lost, whenever we are broken, when there's nothing we can do on our own, there's nothing no one else can do for us to restore what has been lost and broken, who's the only one that can? It's God. And so God can restore that which has been lost. So that finishes out this section here with the prophet's care. But I want us to think, everything that we have seen about Elisha up to this point. What are some of the characteristics maybe that we can see about Elisha through this?
He's caring.
He's caring, right? And he's caring to everybody, is he not? He's caring to widows, he's caring to orphans, he's caring to those who are of his own people. He's caring to those who are not of his own people. He's caring to everyone, no matter who they are, whether they've done anything to deserve it or not. There's a good lesson we learn from that, and that's a great characteristic we see. What else can we recognize? Yeah. Yeah. And so, like Jesse said, that he cares about even every problem, no matter how big, no matter how small. And even with that, we might think about thinking about it from the perspective of his service, that he's willing to work no matter the job, no matter how simple, no matter how difficult, because through it all, what Velda brought up earlier in a lesson learned from the miracle with the axe head, but something we see with Elisha through everything back to chapter 4, it's because Elisha trusts in God, is it not? He has the faith that he needs in God to deliver for him. And really, everything that you look at through this, there's something that's true, was true then, still true today. Everybody in every situation, every state of life, no matter how rich, no matter how poor, no matter how well educated or uneducated, everybody in these chapters had problems, did they not? We all have problems still today. There's a lot of uncertainty that goes on in this life, that one day everything's going great and the next day things aren't going quite as well. One day everything seems like it's in order and it's in place, and the next day something comes up that just takes all of that away from us. There's a lot of uncertainty in life, and that's something we can recognize through all of these chapters we've been looking at. But through all of the uncertainty, there's one thing that remains constant. There's one certainty that's always there, and what is that? It's God. That's a big lesson that we need to learn from this entire section as we look at the prophet's care, because it's not just the prophet, it is God's care. He and He alone can provide and bring us through whatever trials it is that we face. And so from all of these things, we can learn to trust in God, to see His great compassion for us. And let's be struck with wonder and amazement at His providential hand in our lives. And so that is what we find from the prophet's care. Yes?
So that you really see the value of mentoring.
Mm-hmm.
And that, we need to think that the sons of the prophets, how much they benefited from Elisha. I mean, not just talking about the axe head or the pot of stew, but those are all parts of their fellowship together,
Mm-hmm.
and his mentoring, teaching, training, and how the church values, we all need mentors. And we need to, when we think about those that were our Elishas, we need to make sure that we fill that role to someone in the next generation.
Mm-hmm. And because that's exactly what Elisha did. Who was Elisha's mentor? Elijah, right? He was simply passing on what he had received. And so, Dad, to your point there, is that something for us to be thinking about, that we need to be able to help mentor those who are coming along after us, that we're able to give them what it is we receive from those who've gone on before us, from our Elishas or our Elijahs. But at the same time, even if we did not have that for ourselves, can we be honest and realize that maybe we wish that we would have had an Elisha or Elijah in our life? And so the least we can do is be that for someone else, to give them what we did not have ourselves. And so absolutely, one of the big things we see is that mentoring in it. And I know, I mean, you just think about what all Elisha would have been teaching those sons of the prophets. The lessons that would have come. And even then, even if Elisha was never actually just standing up teaching a lesson, the lessons that he's showing through his life, by the way he interacted with other people, by the way that he would go to God and things, and the way that he would look at, again, all the problems that Jesse mentioned, or the way that he treated everybody, no matter who they were, as AG pulled out. And so we realize there are many, many good lessons there, and lessons that we ourselves can be teaching to others. And so let's move in then to this next bigger section here. Not quite as large as the prophet's care, but still very important. And that is going to be from 2 Kings chapter 6 and verse 8, running through the end of chapter 7. And what I've titled this particular section is When the Lord of Hosts Fights. Now, that gives some insight at least to what we're about to be dealing with. You see that title, what do you think we're about to be dealing with? There's about to be some battle. There's about to be maybe a little bit of war. There's going to be some fighting. Not as much in the way that we might think of it, because when the Lord of Hosts shows up, it's going to solve a lot of problems for them and going to prevent a lot of what could have been. But nonetheless, we're going to see the army of the Lord in these things, and we're going to see the hope that Israel should have had. It's maybe easy, whenever we read through all of those things about the prophet's care, to lose sight of what's going on in Israel at large. Because Elisha has been doing these little things to people who've shown acts of faith and signs of trusting God along the way. And we think, okay, everything is maybe starting to look better for the nation. And then we come to this point right here and we realize things really haven't gotten better for the nation. So we've now gone from looking at these snapshots into the little everyday things that are going on and occurrences. Now we've zoomed out and we're looking at the nation at large. So the first thing we're going to note as it relates to when the Lord of Hosts fights is going to be from chapter 6, verse 8 down to verse 23, with this thought of do not fear. And that's a particular phrase that we'll see as we go through this section. But I want someone at first to read verses 8 through 10.
Now the king of Syria was making war against Israel, and he consulted with his servants, saying, my camp will be in such and such a place. And the man of God sent to the king of Israel, saying, beware that you do not pass this place, for the Syrians are coming down there. Then the king of Israel sent someone to the place of which the man of God had told him. Thus he warned him, and he was watchful there, not just once or twice.
So we see Elisha intervening with the plans of the Syrians. What were the plans that the Syrians had based on these verses?
Make war against Israel?
They were ready to make war with Israel, right? They're getting ready for a big fight. So what are they about to do? The king says what? We're going to go make camp at such and such a place. I find it interesting, we don't actually have exactly where that is. I would imagine that the king at least is telling his servant exactly where he plans to set up camp, but I think there's something in that for us that maybe should cause us to stop and realize the power of God and what it is that Elisha was capable of as the man of God, as the prophet of God. What's left for us to see is this very general statement, right? To such and such a place. Anybody know where that is? I don't know.
Over there.
It's somewhere over there, right? And that over there could be over there, over there, over there, over there, 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 right? Anywhere. But, like Jesse said, where doesn't matter because who actually knew where? God knew where. So what does Elisha do? How does he intervene? He tells the king of Israel what's going on. How did Elisha know that? The only way he could know it was because of God. Now, the king of Syria is going to show he's thinking in very human terms about these things as we keep going on, because without God, it is impossible. There's no way he could know unless there's a mole in the camp, unless there's someone who's sending word back. But wasn't what was going on. Elisha knew because God had revealed it to him. It's not the first time that we see that there would be times that God would reveal certain things, this special information to his prophets. We can see that at different points throughout the Old Testament and even with Elisha. But at least at this point right now, what might we be able to learn about the fact that God is making this particular location and this plan of the Syrians known? And maybe to help kind of lead you towards where I'm looking or where I'm trying to head with this. What was the spiritual state of the nation of Israel right now? It wasn't good, was it? You had wicked kings. You had idolatrous worship going on. You had people who didn't care at all about what the prophet had to say, about what God truly had to say. That's the state of the nation as a whole. What reason did God have to reveal this information to them? Because he loves them. Right? When we look at this and we see that God is willing to still reveal this information to Elisha, to then let the king know so that this terrible war doesn't take place. Eventually it's going to come if they don't turn. But God loves them so much that he is patient, is he not? That he is merciful. That he's gracious, that he's withholding what they deserve and he's giving them what they don't deserve. And he wants them to realize, if you will just trust in me. How else would the king have come to know the information about what was going on with the Syrians and their plans for war and where they were going to camp out? How could he have known if not for God? If you were the king, would you not want to make sure that you're on God's good side? Because what that means is that you as a king are going to continue to reign, your family can continue to reign as king, and that the nation is going to have this great success, and it's going to stand and it's going to last. We say that's what we would want, but how often in our own lives do we stay on the good side of God? We realize that we have a problem, don't we? And that's the same problem that the Israelites had as well. Alex? Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So he was the king of Israel, and all of Israel worshiping idols. And God goes to Sodom and Gomorrah, but also that they might know that their idols are worthless because there is no God.
Absolutely. Alex connecting it back to Exodus chapter 9 with the reason why it is that Pharaoh learns why God is bringing these plagues upon the land. So that Pharaoh would know that there were no other gods, right? That all those idols in the land were worthless, but God alone is God. So here in 2 Kings 6, it's just another sign to the king of Israel that all of those idols that you and your people have turned to in the land, they're nothing. It's only God who is the true, living, and powerful God that's able to bring them great success. And so that's what we can learn and what we might be able to recognize through the revealing of that information. And of course, it all comes true as the king would send a servant to that particular location, and tells us that he was watchful there not just once or twice. In other words, he was there all the time, keeping an eye on the Syrians. But also, it's interesting in the way it would have been done, because what we find in the next section is that the Syrians knew exactly what was going on as well. That it wasn't like he was going and hiding behind rocks not to be seen, but the Syrians could see somehow the Israelites know exactly where we are. And that gets us into these next verses with the Syrian threat. Someone go ahead and read verses 11 to 15.
Therefore, the heart of the king of Syria was greatly troubled by this thing. And he called his servant and said to him, Will you not show me which of us is for the king of Israel? And one of the servants said, None, my lord, O king, but Elisha, the prophet, who is in Israel, tells the king of Israel the words that you speak in your bedroom.
Go ahead and stop there for just a second. So what's the king of Syria's response to seeing that the Israelites are coming and observing and know exactly where they are? There's a traitor in our midst. But what does the king's servant speak up and say? No, there's no traitor. You just haven't really thought about who it is you're trying to mess with, right? Because who's he tell the king about? Elisha. He is the prophet in Israel who tells the king what? He tells the king the things that you're saying in your bedroom. Now, the servant here is unnamed, but you're looking at a Syrian servant who's saying these things. We already know that there were at least some Israelite servants among them. You think back to chapter 5, there's the young Israelite girl who was taken captive and was a servant or a slave in Naaman's household. But also, if you notice in 2 Kings chapter 5, it talks about Naaman being a servant to the king. I don't know for sure, but I just wonder right here if maybe this particular servant that's telling the king about Elisha, I wonder if it might not be Naaman himself. That's just my speculation, but to me it would make sense. He knows who Elisha is. He knows the power of God. He knows what it is that's going on. But nonetheless, it's made known to the king, the problem's not in your camp, but rather what's going on is that there is a prophet in Israel, that there is truly a God in Israel. Johnny, go ahead if you don't mind and pick up now in verse 13.
So he said, Go and see where he is, that I may send and get him. And it was told him, saying, Surely he is in Dothan.
And stop there for a second. I'll go ahead and show you a map. I know you're not going to be able to see everything here. I'll zoom it in a second. But this is to at least give you some perspective. So you've got Syria way up there at the top. You know, that's going to be the general area that we're coming from. Damascus would have been probably the closest of the capital cities of Syria. So this is most likely where they would have come from, down somewhere here into Israel. Now to zoom it up, there you can see Damascus a little bit better here. And then you have Dothan and Samaria right down in here. Dothan, the reason they would go there, that's where, I guess historically they say that more of the royal residences and the government officials probably would have actually had their homes and their houses a little bit outside of Samaria in Dothan. It was just, I think, like 5 to 10 miles apart, something like that. So not too bad if you're doing that on horseback. But that's where we are at this point. Johnny, go ahead and read for us now verses 14 and 15.
Therefore he sent horses and chariots and a great army there, and they came by night and surrounded the city. And when the servant of the man of God arose early and went out, there was an army surrounding the city with horses and chariots. And his servant said to him, Alas, my master, what shall we do?
And I think that's a good way we can end with some suspense this morning. And so we'll plan to go ahead and stop right there. I'll leave you with that cliffhanger. You can, of course, read ahead. I encourage you to do that if you haven't already. And Lord willing, we will pick up next week, starting with those verses Johnny just read, and discuss those for a little bit and move on from there. So thank y'all for y'all's attention and y'all's discussion this morning.